channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy Sometimes Mouse, and I talk about books and book-related things. And today I am finally filming my video that explains my reading process, my planning process, my tracking process. All of it ties into each other. I've been asked about both things kind of as separate topics, but unfortunately they are connected. So how I choose my books for my TBR is directly connected to how I track books, and how I plan things with my book blanket, and how I plan my videos. It's all very interconnected because one thing about me is I'm gonna try to think as minimally as possible. That's the nitty-gritty of this, is that I try to think as minimally as possible. If you are new here, hi, welcome, thanks for hanging out. You may not have heard me say this, but if you are not new here, you have heard me say this. My TBR is God. I set a TBR and I read it. I do not deviate from my TBR. I can read anything on the TBR, but I do not deviate until I have finished the TBR, or I am like 2 books away from finishing the TBR. I don't deviate. There's like one exception to that rule, and it's like if art recommends me a book and is like, drop everything on your TBR and read it right now, which doesn't happen very often, but when it does, then I know it's worth it. That's the only time. Nobody else can make me deviate from my TBR also, so don't try. With that, I have broken this out into a script. This is also now the second time that I'm filming this video. I filmed it yesterday, started editing it, and it just felt too scattered because this process is made up of arbitrary and unimportant rules that only matter to me, and explaining that feels a little bit insane. So I have broken things down a little bit better in a script now. So I'm going to start by talking about what tools I use for this whole entire thing. For websites that I use to find books and track books, not track books really, I don't really use either of these for tracking, but just generally websites that I use would be Goodreads and Storygraph. I think eventually, and probably next year, I will leave Goodreads and completely switch over to Storygraph. The issue is that my TBR, I find the want to read section of Goodreads so much easier to navigate than it is on Storygraph. I don't know why, but I just do. So here we are. I also find that sometimes it's weird when it loads on Storygraph, like it errors out and I have to refresh, it's the whole thing. And all of those are very nitpicky things, but I imagine I will eventually completely move over to Storygraph. I quite like it. It's solid. For apps I use on my phone for like tracking time, because you've probably seen me track the time if you've watched my videos before, I use Bookly. I used to use 2 different apps, Bookly and Leio, and I think in my description box it still mentions Leio. The reason I used Leio back then was because the API worked with Goodreads, where it would also update your percentage on Goodreads. It no longer works, so I stopped using it because it stopped working. It also, I think, started crashing a bunch, so I just stopped using it. So now I predominantly use Bookly. I've been using Bookly since 2019. I'm a big fan of it. It works great. Highly recommend if you like to obsessively track how much time you're spending reading, you know? Then for apps I use to actually read ebooks or listen to books, for listening it's going to be Audible and Libby. And I kind of eventually want to leave Audible, I'm not going to lie, and Everand. I use Everand also for audiobooks. For ebooks I use Libby, Calibre, which is on the computer, and then I use the Kobo reading app. I used to use the Kindle reading app and my Kindles, but my Kindles no longer really function as well, and I really like the Kobo reading app better. So I'm asking for a Kobo for my birthday. The e-reader, we'll see, but I like it better, and it works well with Calibre. The reason that I use Calibre is because I've had ebooks since forever, for years and years and years, and they were just kind of very disorganized and just in a folder on Dropbox for years, and now they're in a much more organized system. I like Calibre a lot for that specifically. So if you have several ebooks that are just floating around, especially if you use a system like Kobo instead of Kindle, you kind of just end up with these files. And when I was reading from NetGalley, I had all of these ebooks that just were floating around on my computer, and now they're in an organized thing, and I can filter them by books I've read already, which is really nice, or like haven't read already, which is really nice. For websites that I use for tracking things like stats or just all of the books I want to read and all of that, I use Google Sheets, which is how I get all of my stats for my wrap-ups, and then I use Notion. And I will talk about Notion a little bit more in depth because how I use Notion is specifically how I plan my TBRs, and that feels like you're gonna need much more in-depth explanation. And then for just like general stuff, I use an application called Obsidian, which is a note-taking application. I use that to plan my TBRs and sometimes to script videos. For the most part, I script videos on paper in my commonplacing book, which I'm not getting into what that is. That would be a whole other separate video. But I script there or in a notebook or whatever, but otherwise I use the Obsidian note-taking app. It's really handy for my TBR. It's also where I track my book blanket stuff. I also use a hobonichi for physical tracking, which I will get into towards the end of this video, but I use the hobonichi Cousin Avec, which is the smaller one, and it has daily pages, and I use them to put my actual reading into. And then I also use a notepad, a sticky notepad. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about it towards the end of the video. Those are the tools that I use to do all of these things. And I need to give the caveat and the disclaimer here. All of this is excessive. And if you're thinking, Andy, why don't you do X, Y, and Z? Because this one thing is redundant and this could make this a lot easier. You're probably right, but this process works for me. And so I don't want to change it because it's working. This process means that I don't have to think too hard when I am planning my TBRs or my videos, etc. because I already have a functional list of things and I can filter them and process it. I'm gonna explain that, I promise. This process just makes my life a lot easier. So that's why I do these things. There are some parts that are not about ease, they're about joy, and I'll talk about those too. But for the most part, I don't want to have decision fatigue. And this helps me not have decision fatigue. And I am not a mood reader. That's the other thing. Some people are like, I don't understand how you do that because like, what if you're not in the mood? I've never personally experienced that. There has been like 2 times that I have messaged a friend and been like, I need a fucked up thriller because my brain won't stop. That's it. It's very rare that I experience the mood to read a specific thing. I think there was at one point I was like, I want a cozy romance, I think, and that feels weird. And then I satisfied that itch, but like, this is not a thing for me, okay? I'm not a mood reader. Respect to mood readers, your lives feel chaotic to me, okay? I'm sorry, they feel crazy. That feels chaotic and stressful. Anyway, but my type A shit probably feels stressful to y'all, so fair is fair. All right, let's talk about the process of like how all of this starts from top to bottom, how I figure out reading and tracking and stuff. So first I find a book. That seems obvious. I either find it searching on Goodreads or like on a email list that I get or from a Substack notification or in a bookstore. And if I'm in a bookstore, I take a picture of the book and then add it later to Goodreads, to my want to read on Goodreads. Because I live somewhere where I have no cell phone service half the time. So I have to take a picture and then add it later. I'll add it to Goodreads or Storygraph. Then once I've done that, and I'm sitting at my computer, I will add it to Notion. And my Notion is very simple. It is 2 tables, one with all my series and one with all my books. And then those 2 tables, I have filters. So let me get the screen recording set up for us. So with this, my home base is just the master TBR page. It has the books that I need to read split up into 2 sections, audiobooks and books that I'm reading with my eyes. The reason for this is because sometimes I need just an audiobook and sometimes I just need an ebook and sometimes I need both, but having them split up like this helps me figure out what I need to be reading. It also is set up in a sort so that anything that I have planned is closer to the top and anything that I am currently reading is also closer to the top. This just makes my life easier. That's really it. It just makes my life easier so that I know what's next on my list. Or say I've finished my TBR for the month and it's not close enough to the next month for me to start anything from next month's TBR, so I don't want to read anything that's already planned. I want to read something else. So that's there. The other filter that I have down here is literally all of the unplanned books, so that I can just pick from here as well for what I was just talking about. The unplanned book section is sorted so that anything that is already printed, and I'll talk about why I have things listed as printed or unprinted but in a bit, but anything that's already printed so that I don't have to go in and print it again or print a whole new slew of book covers is up at the top, because those are the ones that I'm going to want to try to read first, because I already have the paper printed out for them. Some other filters that I've got here are by genre. This is important because something that I try to do when I'm planning my TBR is read one book of every genre every month. And so if I need to pick a romance book, I don't have to think about it. I can just filter by genre and then pick a romance book out of there. It also has series, so coming down here, we can see all of the books that I have that are a part of a series and the series that they are a part of. So I can click on any of these pages and it'll take me to the series, which will have how many books are in the series, how many I've read, if I'm up to date, what status it is, and then the actual book links. Now you'll see here I don't have all 6 of these books listed here. That's because I haven't started this series. But for series I'm in the middle of, it'll have most of the books listed because I'm in the middle of it. I'm currently using it. This process at this glance probably feels like a lot, but because I do the books one at a time, once it's already set up, I don't have to think that hard about it. I just add more books to it as I come across more books, more things that I want to read, and then when it comes to time to plan my TBR, I already have a whole list of books that I know I want to read, and they are categorized in such a way that it's easy for me to navigate. So with that, the next question is, how do I plan my TBRs, right? So what do I do when I'm thinking, okay, I have a TBR coming up in May, what am I going to do? So first, I think, what series am I reading right now? I know I'm reading the Witch series and the Discworld series, and both of those are series that I'm just going to keep reading month over month. So I go ahead and find them in Notion and pick them and mark them as planned. If I need to print them, I find the covers and save them into a folder in Dropbox, which also helps me with filming and editing my TBR. It helps me with filming and editing my vlogs, because then I always have those files in Dropbox under a folder that's marked for the month, and I can just grab them. Then I consider, what series do I think I can finish this month? So if there's a trilogy that a new book just came out on and I think, okay, I can reread these 2 books and then read the 3rd book or whatever, I select those as well. Then I pick one book from every genre, because with my Notion, I can just filter by genre. Okay, cool, I'll pick a book. If there isn't a book in a genre, like classics is something that I don't have a ton of books in, that's okay. I can just go find one on Goodreads. But at that point, I'm not like hunting down every single genre and having to filter on Goodreads or figure things out through Goodreads or Storygraph and like stressing myself out. It's already in Notion. I just have to filter it. It's not very complicated. Then I also consider, what book covers do I already have printed out? This is because in this physical tracking, I glue in the book covers. And so if the book covers are already printed, then I don't have to print more book covers, and it saves me a little bit of time. That's all. It just saves me some time. It's not a big deal. There are times where I add books that aren't printed, and then I just print more book covers and just have more book covers that are stored in this notebook. So it's not the end of the world. It's just something I consider when I'm planning a TBR. Then I make sure that Notion is updated appropriately so that the status is set to planned, so then they're moved up to the top of the lists. Then I script my TBR in Obsidian. So I open up Obsidian, I put in the titles that I'm going to read, I find the summaries, I read through the summaries and modify them so they're not as long, or redundant information isn't repeated, or spoilers aren't made. Like, I try to read through them before I actually read them to you guys. Otherwise I trip over my words and I get really confused about what I'm doing. So I do that, essentially just to plan. Print whatever covers are needed for the physical tracking, and then I put all of that stuff, the information about the books, into Google Sheets. Now, I use Art's Google Sheets tracker, and I'm gonna screen record this as well for you guys. I use Art's Google Sheets tracker, however, it's been modified for me specifically. It has publishers in it, it has my monthly stats, it has library savings. These are things that are modified for me specifically. You can see here we've got the books I have planned for April, what I'm in the middle of. This filter here just hides books I've already finished, and this filter just hides books that aren't in April because I don't need to stress myself out by looking at every book and having to scroll down. This largely is just how I get my stats. We've got my compile ratings, all of those things. It helps me plan my wrap-ups, my scripting, and all of those things. This is also where my library savings are, so when I'm talking about that stat in my wrap-up, it's all right here, and I don't have to stress too hard about it because it's already right here. There are times that I have to go back in and fill this stuff back out later, but that's okay because I have something that I do that I can track those things without needing to be at my computer, which I will now talk about. I have my reading journal. I love my reading journal. It's this little hobonichi. At the beginning of the month, I try to remember, I don't always do it, but I try to remember to put down all of the books that I need to read that month, and they're sorted by audiobook, ebook, and print. And then I, again, try to remember to put the actual length of time or actual length of pages for each book so that I know what I'm getting into when I'm planning my daily reading, which is also something I've been asked about and I'm going to explain. For this though, this has been really helpful because I now also try to write a little blurb after I finish a book. I write a silly little review, silly little blurb. This is handy. I can carry it around. I don't have to whip out my phone or take out my computer or whatever when I'm trying to do an update. And when I'm filming a vlog or doing a wrap-up, I have those notes so that I can say, hey, these are the things I really liked about this book. Because sometimes if it's been 3 weeks since I finished a book and it's still my favorite book of that month and I have to talk about it in a wrap-up, it's hard for me to remember the things I specifically liked. I just know that I liked the book. So this helps with that a lot. For how I plan my daily planning, and I talked about this in a vlog, and this is redundant, irrelevant, my own, it's just for me, this system. It just means that when I get up in the morning, I don't have to think about what I'm going to read that day. I already did that. I already spent the time thinking about it, so I don't have to continue to think about it. So I take this silly little piece of notebook paper, or whatever sticky notes I have available. This just happens to be the one that I have right next to me. And I know some things about myself. I know for ebooks, I usually can only get 25% into them, like a quarter of them a day. I know that's how much I can read, ebook, print, whatever. I know that. I know for audiobooks, if it is under 10 hours, under 12 hours, I can probably get 50% into it in a day. If it is over that, I should just set it to quarters. I also know that I only like to read 2 books per day, unless I'm also reading graphic novels, and then I can just throw those in if I feel like I will have time to read them. So, what other things do I consider? I don't like to have an unfinished audiobook by Friday because I don't like to listen to audiobooks on the weekend. Which means I also don't like to be in the middle of a series by Friday. I like to be done with the series by Friday. So then I don't have to try and remember whatever was going on Monday and think, what was I reading? What was going on? Because my memory sucks. We've talked about it. It's a black hole. My memory is trash. So I consider all of those things when I'm planning. So on a Monday, okay, I'm going to get 25% into this book and 50% into this book. Tuesday, 50% into the ebook and 100% into the audiobook. And I carry on that way with the considerations that I mentioned before. It's very not complicated, but it's also irrelevant. There are times where I don't meet those goals because work was crazy or something happened or I got a migraine, and it doesn't matter. I just erase it, change it, catch up later. It doesn't matter. It's not real, it doesn't matter. Because I'm not getting a prize for following this. I don't win anything. It just keeps me from having to plan. Or not from having to plan, but from having to think about it. I'm never sitting at my desk going, I don't know what to read next. I'm overwhelmed with options. I don't know what I'm supposed to read next. I don't know what I want to do next. And I really appreciate that. And that's my system. It feels like it's probably a lot to some people and maybe not to other people. For me, like I've said multiple times, this just keeps me from having to experience decision fatigue. My job is very difficult and I have to think constantly, and this prevents me from having to think too hard about stuff. The paper tracking is probably the most redundant thing that I do, the book journal, but I enjoy it so much, and I enjoy looking back on it, flipping through it, using it when I'm filming. It's helpful for me, and I like it. That's it. I like it. So that's why I use it. But that is it. That is how I do the things. If I didn't answer one of your questions in this video, please just leave them in the comments down below. If I feel like it needs to have its own video, I will let you know, but otherwise I will try to respond to the comment and answer any questions. If you liked this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If this is the first time you've ever met me, hi, yes, I'm type A and insane. That's... shockingly, I have ADHD, but I meticulously plan things. Actually, I think that's because of the ADHD. But anyway, that's not a conversation for y'all. That's one for my psychiatrist. I'm just kidding. But if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If you have a reading process that is similar to mine, let me know. I'd like to hear about it. I think hearing about other people's processes is really great. Like series track, I watched a video where somebody was just like, I just track my series that I'm in the middle of, and that's literally all I do. And that's when I realized I had no idea how many series I was in the middle of. That's when I started tracking them. So I'm always curious about how other people do things. If you didn't enjoy this video, I don't plan to make another one. So don't worry about it. I post videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays except for, nope. I post videos every Tuesdays and Thursdays at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time every single week except for the first full week of the month because I like to take breaks. So with that in mind, I will see you guys on Thursday. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. I'm gonna go. Okay, thanks, bye.